Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Gopijana Vallabha Girivardhari. Jaya Gopijana Vallabha Girivardhari. Yashodanandana Bhattachandra Ranjana. Yashodanandana Bhattachandra Ranjana. Yamunatira Vanachari. Yamunatira Vanachari. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Jai Vishnupada Paramahansa Parajikacharya Ashtoto to the Sri Srimad His Divine Grace Srila A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada Ki Jai. ISKCON BBT Founder Acharya Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Jai Om Vishnupad Paramahansa Parajikacharya Ashtoto to the Sri Srimad His Divine Grace Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur Ki Jai. Ananda Koti Vaishnavindra Ki Jai. Namacharya Srila Haridas Thakur Ki Jai. Srimad Bhagavad Gita Ki Jai. Samaveda Bhaktivinoda Ki Jai. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glory to Sri Guru and Gauranga. Okay. Why don't you hold on to this? And I'll give the number. It's on silent, so. Okay. Alrighty. So we're on page 512. If you have a book at home, we're on 12.5, page 512, most printings. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. On this 30th day of March 2020 in SanDiego, we're reading from Bhagavad Gita as it is, translation and commentary by His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada. And we're in chapter 12 entitled Devotional Service, text number 5 on page 512 of most printings. Klesho dikadathastesham avyakta saktachetasam avyakta hikatir dukkam dehavan viravapyate. Klesho dikadathastesham avyakta saktachetasam avyakta hikatir dukkam dehavan viravapyate. Klesho dikadathastesham avyakta saktachetasam avyakta hikatir dukkam dehavan viravapyate. Klesho dikadathastesham avyakta sakta chetasam, avyakta hikatir dukkam, tehabandhiravapite, klesha, trouble, adhikataraha, very much, tesham, of them, avyakta, to the unmanifested, asakta, attached, chetasam, of those whose minds, avyakta, toward the unmanifested, he, certainly, gatihi, progress, dukkam, with trouble, dehavadbihi, by the embodied, avapite, is achieved. Can you make sure that these lights are on all the way? I think they are, but just double check. Give me a better shot here. Translation. For those whose minds are attached to the unmanifested, impersonal feature of the Supreme, advancement is very troublesome. To make progress in that discipline is always difficult for those who are embodied. Purport. The group of transcendentalists who follow the path of the inconceivable, unmanifested, impersonal feature of the Supreme Lord are called Jnana Yogis, and persons who are in full Krishna consciousness, engaged in devotional service to the Lord, are called Bhakti Yogis. Now, here the difference between Jnana Yoga and Bhakti Yoga is definitely expressed. The process of Jnana Yoga, although ultimately bringing one to the same goal, is very troublesome, whereas the path of Bhakti Yoga, the process of being in direct service to the Supreme Personality of Godhead, is easier and is natural for the embodied soul. The individual soul is embodied since time immemorial. It is very difficult for him to simply theoretically understand that he is not the body. Therefore, the Bhakti Yogi accepts the deity of Krishna as worshipable because there is some bodily conception fixed in the mind, which can thus be applied. Of course, worship of the Supreme Personality of Godhead in his form within the temple is not idol worship. There is evidence in the Vedic literature that worship may be saguna or nirguna, of the Supreme possessing or not possessing attributes. Worship of the deity in the temple is saguna worship, for the Lord is represented by material qualities. But the form of the Lord, though represented by material qualities such as stone, wood, or oil paint, is not actually material. That is the absolute nature of the Supreme Lord. A crude example may be given here. We may find some mailboxes on the street, and if we post our letters in those boxes, they will naturally go to their destination without difficulty. But any old box or an imitation which we may find somewhere but which is not authorized by the post office will not do the work. Similarly, God has an authorized representation in the deity form which is called Archa Vigraha. This Archa Vigraha is an incarnation of the Supreme Lord. God will accept service through that form. The Lord is omnipotent, all-powerful. Therefore, by his incarnation as Archa Vigraha, he can accept the services of the devotee, just to make it convenient for the man in conditioned life. So for a devotee, there is no difficulty in approaching the Supreme immediately and directly. But for those who are following the impersonal way to spiritual realization, the path is difficult. They have to understand the unmanifested representation of the Supreme through such Vedic literatures as the Upanishads. And they have to learn the language, understand the non-perceptual feelings, and realize all these processes. This is not very easy for a common man. A person in Krishna consciousness, engaged in devotional service simply by the guidance of the bona fide spiritual master, simply by offering regulative obeisances unto the deity, simply by hearing the glories of the Lord, and simply by eating the remnants of foodstuffs offered to the Lord, realizes the Supreme Personality of Godhead very easily. There is no doubt that the impersonalists are unnecessarily taking a troublesome path with the risk of not realizing the absolute truth at the ultimate end. But the personalist, without any risk, trouble, or difficulty, approaches the Supreme Personality directly. A similar passage appears in Srimad Bhagavatam. It is stated there that if one ultimately has to surrender unto the Supreme Personality of Godhead, this surrendering process is called bhakti, but instead takes the trouble to understand what is Brahman and what is not Brahman and spends his whole life in that way, the result is simply troublesome. Therefore, it is advised here that one should not take up this troublesome path of self-realization, because there is uncertainty in the ultimate result. A living entity is eternally an individual soul, and if he wants to merge into the spiritual whole, he may accomplish this realization of the eternal and knowledgeable aspects of his original nature, but the blissful portion is not realized. By the grace of some devotee, such a transcendentalist, highly learned in the process of jnana yoga, may come to the point of bhakti yoga, or devotional service. At that time, long practice in impersonalism also becomes a source of trouble, because he cannot give up the idea. Therefore, an embodied soul is always in difficulty with the unmanifest, both at the time of practice and at the time of realization. Every living soul is partially independent, and one should know for certain that this unmanifested realization is against the nature of his spiritual blissful self. One should not take up this process. For every individual living entity, the process of Krishna consciousness, which entails full engagement in devotional service, is the best way. If one wants to ignore this devotional service, there is the danger of turning to atheism. Thus, the process of centering attention on the unmanifested, the inconceivable, which is beyond the approach of the senses, as already expressed in this verse, should never be encouraged at any time, especially in this age. It is not advised by Lord Krishna. Om Jnana Timirandasya Jnanandjana Shalakaya Chakshu Unmilitam Mena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. I was born in the darkness of ignorance, but my spiritual master Srila Prabhupada opened my eyes with the torchlight of knowledge. I offer my humble obeisances unto him and all members of Shri Parampara, the disciplic succession. So just to let anyone out there who's listening and who may want to ask a question, we're going to stop at 8 and see if there are any questions. You can text 858-291-9815. That's 858-291-9815. Anytime during the class, and then at 8 o'clock we'll read the questions. So, Krishna is continuing his answer to Arjun's question, which he enunciated in text 1. Arjun asked, which are considered to be more perfect, those who are always properly engaging in devotional service, or those who worship the impersonal Brahman, the unmanifested? And Krishna gave as plain as answer as it could possibly be. Those who fix their minds on my personal form and are always engaged in worshiping me with great and transcendental faith are considered by me to be most perfect. But he doesn't discount the impersonalists and says in the next few verses, but those who fully worship the unmanifested, that which lies beyond the perception of the senses, the all-pervading, inconceivable, unchanging, fixed and immovable, the impersonal conception of the absolute truth, by controlling the various senses, being equally disposed to everyone, such persons engage in the welfare of all, at last achieve me. So how do they last achieve Krishna? By coming to the point of bhakti, ultimately. That's the it's very clear that they go through all of this trouble, but in the end, they have to come to... Krishna is not going to respond to anything but bhakti. And then in the first verse, which you just read, which is a often quoted verse, Klesho adhikataste sham, that such a path is very troublesome. And Prabhupada explains why. Because all of the things that we do in bhakti, the hearing of the holy and chanting of the holy name to begin with, and so many other things such as Bhagavad Gita literatures, the worship of the deities, the upkeep of the temple, the arts and crafts, the music, all of these things engage the senses, which are what is keeping us attracted here. What is our problem? The problem is that as spirit soul, we are completely compromised on this material plane. We've turned away from Krishna since time immemorial, as Prabhupada says here, and we've been embodied in countless forms, and many of them, the lower forms, there's no chance of self-realization. It's just a episode of suffering and then rebirth. Finally, come to the human form. You know, how many times you've been in human forms? We don't know that either. And we're carrying with us all of this conditioning that we've had in these other forms also. So there's an animal side to us. The senses are attracted to the sense gratification. So what's the difference? Well, we have the ability to reason and to inquire about our ultimate situation. It's not simply hand to mouth, eating, sleeping, mating, defending. It doesn't have to be. That's the great value of the human life. But unfortunately, without the proper guide, the proper source of knowledge, we have no chance of really fulfilling the mission of human life, and we act like animals and go down again. And so it's just been unlimited suffering for many, many births, creations coming and going. So there's a imperative out of many thousands of human beings, Manushyanam Sahasreshu Kaschijadati Siddhi, one will endeavor for perfection, which means at least some sort of path to end the suffering entirely and, get free from birth and death. But those, out of many who strive for perfection, Manushyanam Kaschijadati Siddhaye, there were a few that would attain some kind of perfection, at least yogic perfection or something. And out of many of those, Satatam Siddhanam Kaschin Mam Veti Tattvada. A few will actually understand Krishna in truth. So it's very rare, and these are part of the one of the category of transcendentalists who oftentimes don't understand Krishna in truth, especially the Mayavadis, who become their philosophy is geared on the idea that all of this variety that we relish in Krishna consciousness, ways of contacting Krishna through his pastimes, through his name, through his form, his devotees, all of this variety, it's all Maya. In other words, they're offenders from day one. And so it's very difficult for them, unless they meet someone very powerful like Lord Chaitanya, to be converted to bhakti. And here's this whole idea, see how this contrasts with the beginning of chapter 9. Chapter 9 is the most confidential knowledge, it's all about bhakti. So right in the second verse, Krishna says, Raja Guyam, Raja Vidya Raja Guyam, Pavitramidam Uttamam, Pratyakshabagamam Damyam, Susukam Kartamabhyam. This bhakti is the king of knowledge, the king, the most secret of secrets, most purifying, Pavitramidam Uttamam, of all processes. You can directly experience the results, Pratyakshabagamam Damyam. It's not theoretical, we can experience your advancement. And susukam, it is happily performed, which means it's easily performed also. I was just hearing Prabhupada, I like to listen to these lectures again and again, this Sadhu Sangashtaka, I've dubbed it the 8 verses from 3:25:20 through 27, where Kapila Muni is speaking to his mother, and he's explaining the necessity for contacting a real sadhu, and transferring your affection, your attraction to them so that you can receive the knowledge and advance in that way. The association of the devotees, sadhu sangha, is so important. It gives a definition of the sadhu and everything. And then he comes to the point of describing the actual experience. Satam prasangan mama virya samvido bhavanti ritkana rasayana kata. Tadjoshana rasu abhavarga vartmani shraddha rati bhakti anukramishiti. That in the association of real sadhus, devotees, you're going to hear glorification of me, purely. That'll really purify you. Mama virya samvido. Samvido means conversation or vibration of my powerful activities. Bhavanti, and it's not, this is it's the medicine to cure birth and death, but it's very sweet. Ritkana rasayana. It's like a life-giving elixir for the heart and for the ear and for the mind. And what's the result of this? This is the path of liberation, natural path, just sitting and hearing from this real sadhus. Tadjoshana, by applying this method, ashu, quickly, apavarga vartmani, this path of liberation, one develops step by step shraddha, rati and bhakti. Shraddha, rati, bhakti, anukramishati, step by step. So that development of the faith is all important, because what do the impersonalists lack? They lack faith. They in fact lack faith that Krishna is the absolute truth. And therefore anything that is spoken about him, it means they lack faith in the parampara and everything. So that faith is so important, adav shraddha. So that's nourished in the association of devotees. You can just take yourself back to those first, seminal meetings where Prabhupada finally had his own place, 22nd Avenue, and he's got a small group of enthusiasts who are some serious. There's a lot of people come and go, and they can also advance eventually. But some are serious, and they're really spending hours with him. And what are they doing? They're associating with the sadhu, and their faith is increasing because of not just the words he speaks, but the quality behind them, the absolute realization and the ananda that he's feeling doing it. That's all giving them faith that they want to practice also. So that's the key thing, that Shraddha is nourished, and then by engaging in the practice, the bhajan, the rati it starts, the real attraction for Krishna, and the ability to distance yourself from the passions, that you're involved in. And ultimately bhakti comes, actual devotion and pure devotion. And the next verse, he describes that bhaktyapam anjati viraga aindriyad, that this process of bhakti naturally results in detachment from the world, of drishta shrutan, of two things. The things that you've already seen and experienced. When he talks about drishta, oftentimes it includes all the senses. Just like param drishtva navartate, that verse in the 2nd chapter, that one may artificially restrain himself from the object of the senses, but the taste remains. But when you see drishtva, you experience through all your senses the param, the supreme Krishna, then that detachment becomes fixed. So we're talking about that. So he says that the attachments you've already experienced, the sense gratifications, which will plant the seed for doing it again and bring you back again. That you become detached from, and from those you just heard about. In other words, the enticement of going to the heavenly planets and enjoying like everything, which is a big thing for those who are familiar with that part of the Vedas, Both of them you become indifferent to, because you're becoming attracted to Krishna. How? Madvachanano chintaya, by fixing the mind on my activities, my lila. He said, madvachanano chintaya. Chittasya yato yoga yukto, and engage in this yoga process of just sitting and hearing and associating with sadhus. When folk concentrates the mind. And then he says, chittasya yukto rijubhya yoga margai. In this way, you practice the easiest form of yoga, Rijubhya Yoga Margai. It's just, so much of our yoga, you get online and you listen to a kirtan. They just had a mela in Bangladesh. One of these kirtan melas. You can see, there's Gopi and Madhava and some of the other leaders, Kadambakana and Maharaj. And people are just sitting there. They're sitting in this hall. It's not that big. It's crowded, And there's, an hour and a half go on, and everyone is just absorbed. Easy yoga, but the highest yoga. So as opposed to this impersonalism, where the holy name, it's Maya, the deity's Maya, prasadam's Maya, then where's the attraction? How are you going to become attracted to nothing? That's the problem, is that, he says, avyakta asakta chetasam. Avyakta asakta. This asakta word is prominent in the 7th chapter. It's all, when you see the sweep of the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna goes through different types of yoga in the first chapters. He's got the karma yoga and the jnana yoga, and then he comes to the Ashtanga yoga, chapter 6. And that Ashtanga yoga, within that chapter, there's this wonderful description that you experience the highest pleasure, having achieved this, you think there's no further thing to achieve, right? And you enjoy through transcendental senses. But the process itself is impossible, for ordinary people to engage in. So at the end, of course, he encourages Arjuna and says that the best yogi is one who's always thinking of me, yoginam api sarvesham. What's the next verse? The first verse of the 7th chapter. Maya asakta manaparta. That word asakta is there. Now I'm going to explain how your mind can be naturally and easily become attached to me. This is the whole, now he's entering the middle 6 chapters with the 7 through 12. This is the last one. And so this is what we need. We need a way that the mind can, feasible way. Yes, there are austerities, but it's something we can do, that the mind can be drawn away, cured of its attachment to matter and become naturally attached to spirit. And so he begins, explaining how you can see me in everything. The earth, water, fire, ether, and the taste of water, the sight, the light of the sun and the moon. In this way, you can think of me in your daily experiences. So, but he goes on, and the 8th chapter is like a little bit there's some of the 6th chapter and the 8th chapter, the meditation and everything. But still, it's the whole idea is to fix the mind on Krishna. And when you get to the 9th chapter, it comes down to this simple formula. Think of me, become my devotee. Okay, you won't be able to think of me constantly. Become my devotee, follow the principles of sadhana bhakti, and you'll gradually be able to think of me more and more, and offer your obeisances and worship me. It's a simple process, it's an easy process, it's a feasible process for us. And here in the 12th chapter, after the 10th chapter, how to see Krishna and everything magnificent, 11th chapter, awe-inspiring. But now we come down to the 12th chapter, and it's all this bhakti, very concise. This is a very short chapter, 20 verses. And here he's explaining, you want to be avyakta asakta. How can your mind be attached to something invisible? No qualities, no attributes. It's very difficult. Prabhupada explains that. And finally, what's the point? What's the point of going down that route if you can become, the easy and feasible route and happily engaged in route of the bhakti? So you see this in Lord Chaitanya's Leela. Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya. There's so many nice verses that he wrote that are included in Padyavali. And here's someone who is steeped in this impersonalism. The whole pastime where he had the good fortune where Lord Chaitanya comes into the temple in Jagannath Puri, and he's managing the temple. He's the learned, he's super learned and skilled in Sanskrit. And Lord Chaitanya is so magnificent, this effulgent sannyasi, and he falls down, and then the usual thing is, oh God, the guards come, oh boy, here's one of these fakers, they're about to beat him. So wait. And so, he sees, he was in samadhi there. He wasn't breathing or anything hardly. So he says, he's a little bit breathing. Okay, so take him to my house. So he immediately had affection for him, and that really opened the door to everything else. So then, but he's still a Mayavadi, and he's saying, well, how's this, magnificent-looking young man, 24, going to keep sannyas? Because they all look like Mayavadi sannyasis. That's they're shaved up. So he said, all right. I'll teach him Vedanta. No shika, because and so he says, I'll teach you Vedanta. He says, okay. So there's that painting, that famous painting, Lord Chaitanya's 7 days. So after 7 days, he doesn't say anything. And so, are you understanding what I'm saying? You're not asking any questions. So Lord Chaitanya says, I understand the sutras perfectly well, but your explanation is the obscuring of all right, so why don't you tell me? So then he explains it. Oh, okay. It's personal. Vedanta is personal. And he's completely converted, and which is a big deal because he had tremendous influence there, And then he writes 100 verses about Lord Chaitanya right off the bat, just like that Keshava Kashmiri, the pastime where when Lord Chaitanya was just a young boy, really, but he had his own school because he was so brilliant. And this scholar came. They would have competitions, and he would challenge all the scholars in Navadvip, and there were a lot of them, to a debate because he had conquered. He was known as Digvijaya. He had conquered all over, so he's coming to Navadvip. And it describes how all of the other scholars, the elders, they had some excuse to leave town. So there was only, so all that was left was Lord Chaitanya. So he meets him on the bank of the Ganges, and he had heard about him, and Lord Chaitanya said, yeah, we'll have a discussion. And he had his friends with him, his students, the young boys. So Lord Chaitanya said, okay, why don't you utter something in glorification of the Ganges? They're sitting right in the Ganges there. So he composes 100 verses off the bat, which is quite a feat of erudition, So Lord Chaitanya said, very, very nice, But now, can you explain the good qualities and the faults in this one verse? There are no faults. So so Lord Chaitanya memorized one of those, and he recites it to him, and he says, "Well, you think there are no faults? No faults." So then Lord Chaitanya describes 3 or 4 technical problems with him. So he's completely shocked, and he said, Saraswati, why have you abandoned me? Like that. So she comes in a dream and says, well, he's my master, this is God. Anyway, so Sarvabhauma did the same thing. not in challenging, but in glorification. Now, one of those I recently rediscovered, and this is a verse I just discovered right before Gaur Purnima, which is, it's a super verse. You can learn it. Harekrishna Rama Nama Gana Dana Karanim Shoka Moha Lobha Tapasava Vigna Nashinim Padapadma Lubda Bhakta Vrinda Bhakti Dayinim Golden Muta Masha Naumi Nama Sutta Dharinim. So, Hare Krishna Rama Nama Gana Dana Karinim. Karinim means he made a gift, dana, of the song, Gana, of the mantra composed of the names Hare Krishna Rama. I guess we know what that one is, right? So Hare Krishna Rama Nama, and if you accept that gift, then Shoka Moha Lobha Tapa Salva Vigna Nashinim. All of your distresses are destroyed, headed by lamentation, illusion, greed, sufferings of all kinds, you're relieved of them. And for those fortunate devotees who are greedy for the dust of the lotus feet of the Lord, Pada Padma Lubdha, Lubdha is greed, Pada Padma Lubdha Bhakta Vrinda Bhakti Dayanim. For them he bestows the highest prema bhakti. I quickly and enthusiastically glorify this golden avatar, Lord Chaitanya, who is sitting in a solitary place chanting japa on a knotted string. This is what he would do, he's meditating on it. So this is a sea change. In other words, there's other 99 verses are also beautiful. You have it, I can give it to you. But it just shows, here's one of many examples. You had of course, Shukadeva Goswami. He wasn't a Mayavadi, but he was a Brahmavadi, just like the four Kumaras. And that's the significance of this famous Atmarama verse, that even those who may have attained some sense of, bliss, being absorbed in the Atma, whatever, they also become attracted to worship Krishna, attracted by Lord Hari's wonderful qualities. Atmaramastamunayon nirgranta apyarukume. They already have no knots. They have no ties to the material world. Just like Shukadev, he went straight from the womb to sannyas. Completely detached. But he describes himself, how I became, attracted and maddened really by hearing the qualities of Hari. And so therefore I studied Bhagavatam from my father. So this is the central point of Bhakti Yoga, is that it's practical, it's natural, and it really brings you to your original state of purity, back home, back to Godhead. In other words, we're not just, quanta of consciousness. We're not impersonal. We have a form, we have qualities, we have activities in our pure state. That's why mukti is defined in the Bhagavatam so nicely, mukti hidvanyata rupam swarupena vivastiti. That mukti doesn't mean some merging into the Brahman. It means giving up all these other forms that we've had, millions of them, and being situated in our swarup, our actual eternal form, just suitable for our specific service to Krishna. Whether it's a coward boy, coward girl, cow, whatever it may be. We're happy in that form, and we're fully conscious as any other being. But that's our state, and it doesn't change. Once going there, we don't come back. So that's the advantage, and these verses are definitive, showing how only a fool would take. It's a sign of envy of Krishna to negate that and to try to go for the impersonal. It means that basically it's evidence that I just want my liberation, as Prahlad says, prayena devamanayo svavamukti kama. They're lusty after their own liberation. They don't care about anyone else, and off they go, to some secluded place, the Himalayas or whatever, to try to control the senses and merge into Brahman. But you notice Krishna says, they also eventually come to me, but with these caveats, controlling the senses, being equally disposed to everyone, such but engaged in the welfare of all. So if you're wandering alone somewhere, trying to be liberated, you're not engaged in the welfare of all. Then you won't achieve Krishna. You have to be in a state where you can eventually be converted to bhakti, even if you're at first attracted to the impersonal. And actually many devotees, were going here and there, this yoga, that yoga, trying to meditate. I did that, But when you come in contact with Krishna, and especially with the literature, if you're philosophically inclined, which is important, then you see, oh, this is what I've been looking for. This is really Krishna consciousness. Okay, so let's go on. This very wonderful purport. Okay, so now he continues, 6 and 7. Yetu sarvani karmani mai sanyasya matparaha ananyenaiva yogena mam dayanta upasati teshamaham samudharta mrityu samsara sagarat bhavamina charat parta maya veshita chetasam. But those who worship me, giving up all their activities to me, unto me, and being devoted to me without deviation, engaged in devotional service and always meditating upon me, having fixed their minds upon me, O son of Pritha. For them, I am the swift deliverer from the ocean of birth and death. Purport. It is explicitly stated here that the devotees are very fortunate to be delivered very soon from material existence by the Lord. In pure devotional service, one comes to the realization that God is great and that the individual soul is subordinate to him. His duty is to render service to the Lord, and if he does not, then he will render service to Maya. As stated before, the Supreme Lord can be appreciated only by devotional service. Therefore, one should be fully devoted. One should fix his mind fully on Krishna in order to achieve him. One should work only for Krishna. It does not matter in what kind of work one engages, but that work should be done only for Krishna. That is the standard of devotional service. The devotee does not desire any achievement other than pleasing the Supreme Personality of Godhead. His life's mission is to please Krishna, and he can sacrifice everything for Krishna's satisfaction, just as Arjuna did in the battle of Kurukshetra. The process is very simple. One can devote himself in his occupation and engage at the same time in chanting Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Such transcendental chanting attracts the devotee to the personality of Godhead. The Supreme Lord herein promises that without delay he will deliver a pure devotee thus engaged from the ocean of material existence. Those who are advanced in yoga practice can willfully transfer the soul to whatever planet they like by the yoga process, and others take the opportunity in various ways, but as far as the devotee is concerned, it is clearly stated here that the Lord himself takes him. The devotee does not need to wait to become very experienced in order to transfer himself to the spiritual sky. In the Varaha Purana, this verse appears, I'll say you say, Narai Nayami Paramang Sthanam Archad Adi Gatimbina Garudaskandamaropya Yatechamanavarita. I'm sorry. The purport of this verse is that a devotee does not need to practice Ashtanga Yoga in order to transfer his soul to the spiritual planets. The responsibility is taken by the Supreme Lord himself. He clearly states here that he himself becomes the deliverer. A child is completely cared for by his parents, and thus his position is secure. Similarly, a devotee does not need to endeavor to transfer himself by yoga practice to other planets. Rather, the Supreme Lord, by his great mercy, comes at once, riding on his bird carrier Garuda, and at once delivers the devotee from material existence. Although a man who has fallen in the ocean may struggle very hard and may be very expert in swimming, he cannot save himself. But if someone comes and picks him up from the water, then he is easily rescued. Similarly, the Lord picks up the devotee from this material existence. One simply has to practice the easy process of Krishna consciousness and fully engage himself in devotional service. Any intelligent man should always prefer the process of devotional service to all other paths. In Narayaniya, this is confirmed as follows: Yavai sadhana sampatti purushata chatushteye tayavinatadapnoti naro narayanashriyah. The purport of this verse is that one should not engage in the different processes of fruitive activity or cultivate knowledge by the mental speculative process. One who is devoted to the Supreme Personality can attain all the benefits derived from other yogic processes, speculation, ritual, sacrifice, charities, etc. That is the specific benediction of devotional service. Simply by chanting the holy name of Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, a devotee of the Lord can approach the supreme destination easily and happily. But this destination cannot be approached by any other process of religion. The conclusion of Bhagavad Gita is stated in the 18th chapter. Sarva dharmam parityajya mamekang sharanam vraja aham tvang sarva papebhyo mokshiyasyami ma shuchaha. One should give up all other processes of self-realization and simply execute devotional service in Krishna consciousness. That will enable one to reach the highest perfection of life. There is no need for one to consider the sinful actions of his past life, because the Supreme Lord fully takes charge of him. Therefore, one should not futilely try to deliver himself in spiritual realization. Let everyone take shelter of the Supreme Omnipotent Godhead Krishna. That is the highest perfection of life. I forgot to cite one verse that Prabhupada referred to in this previous purport, and with this topic, it really has to be shared. Prabhupada's referring to another verse. A similar passage appears in Srimad Bhagavatam. That similar passage is a prayer of Lord Brahma in chapter 14, where he says, Shreyak Shritim Bhaktimadasyate Vibho Klishyandiye Keva Labodha Labdiye Teshamaso Kleshula Eva Shishite Nanyetita Stulatushaga Avagatanam. Which means that one who gives up the auspicious path of bhakti, Shreyak Shritim Bhaktim, Dasyate Vibho, O Lord, he's speaking to little Krishna who's God, he realizes, and takes to the difficult path, Klishyanti, Klishyanti, he suffers, Kevala Bodha Labdiye, the impersonal path. Then what's his result? Tesham aso kleshala eva shishyate. The result, the remnant of that, the final result of that is just trouble. Tesham aso kleshala eva shishyate. Just as one may take I don't know how it's done with the rice, or maybe it's grain, that they knock it and get all the grain out. So you take one of those empty sheaths and you beat it, and what's the result? Nothing, just the trouble, I give the example, I don't know, I'm pretty sure I'm accurate about this, in Greek mythology or something, there's an example of someone who's mad, because Greece, you get all the islands, so they're right near the ocean. So you see someone on the beach, seriously taking a big rod, and beating the waves, like, seriously. Crazy. There's nothing can come from that. Because we have so many examples right on the street here. But that's a lot of trouble for nothing. That's the whole idea. We have the same thing right at the beginning of Bhagavatam, where it says, referring to your dutifully doing your duties within Varna ashram. I think that, it says, Dharmak svanustitak pungsam vishakshena katasuyak notpadiye jariratim shama evahi kevalam. This phrase, shama eva, is just that when all of one's activities in Varna and ashram, you don't attain an attraction to hear about Krishna, whatever your dharma may be, this is the measure of its success, real dharma, and then it's just a lot of trouble for nothing. So that's, anyone claims to be religious, if you're really not attracted to hear about God and ultimately serve God, then it's a kaitava dharma. Okay, any questions yet?
From Bhaktin Ace, she says, Hare Krishna, can you help me understand the covering veil that surrounds the soul?
The covering veil that surrounds the soul. Nice to hear from you, Bhakti Ace. Hare Krishna. Hare Krishna. So the covering veil, it's not called a veil, it's called a kosha. Kosha is kind of like a silkworm's cocoon, and it's said by Kapila that the bhakti dissolves that, or dissolves that cocoon, or that sheath around the soul. So the soul, the living entity, is naturally attracted to Krishna. Prabhupada explained to us, we came from the spiritual world. We turned away from Krishna. And as soon as we turn away from Krishna, we get attracted to the material energy. So how does that happen? That's very detailed explanation by Kapiladev in the 3rd canto. How the interface between the soul and the material world is this false ego, the false sense of self. We've lost our true sense of self as servants of Krishna, and we acquire this false sense of self so that we can enact this charade, really, of pretending to be Krishna, eventually learn our lesson that it's just a lot of suffering. We can't really enjoy separately. And by the association of those who are real knowledge, come to the point of, again, turning toward Krishna systematically and going back. So the false sheath consists of basically the gross and subtle bodies. The ego, this false sense of self, and the kind of the model for it, or this essence of it, is me and mine. As that you develop this material body, and it's described in detail how it goes from the ego in contact with the mode of passion produces the mind. Produces the intelligence. The mode of goodness produces the mind, and the mode of in contact with the mode of ignorance produces all the senses, and one after another the different sense objects and their functions, so that you end up with a material body that you're identifying with instead of your spiritual body, which remains covered. It's not just the spirit, but it's the soul that's covered, but it's the soul and its whole personality and its activities and everything. So it's like a recurring dream. It's described like that. Arte vidyamana pi sangsate nanavartate dhyayato vishayanasya swapne nartagamo yata. This verse appears 5 times in the Bhagavatam, once with a slight deviation, and it's a very important verse. So he says that sangsriti, our entanglement in samsara, with all of its attendant sufferings of birth, death, old age, and disease, and the threefold miseries, ultimately doesn't exist in reality, just as a dream. But just as in a dream, the sufferings don't stop if you're in a nightmare until you wake up. Similarly, when we're meditating and focused on the objects of the senses, because that's what it means to have a material body, whether it's a human body or other body, have a certain sense of sense objects, and we're the enjoyer and the controller and everything that goes with that. Until you wake up from the dream, you can't be cured of the sufferings. They may be subtle, they may be a dream, but they're very real to you at the time. And so that process of bhakti wakes us up from the dream, where we're trained to act on the spiritual platform, even with these material senses. And that brings us back, of course, to the deity and the holy name, and the ways in which Krishna reaches out to us, mostly through his representatives, but also, through the holy name, through the deity, giving us a chance to perceive him through these very senses, which are so imperfect, and really covering our spiritual senses. So, by the contact with Krishna, the material becomes spiritual. That very much is true of the deity. The deity, as we know, is originally made of stone, wood, or metal, or even paint probably refers to. But when that deity is installed by a pure devotee and is worshipped by sincere devotees, then he agrees to receive the worship of the sadhakas and to reciprocate. One can actually see the Lord and attain darshan, and association. And so the deity worship is so important because it's tangible. Anyone can come into the temple and benefit from the atmosphere, from the deity worship, the prasadam. It's just food, it's just a statue. No, it's not, because it's actually the bhakti has entered into it because of the way we're relating to them. They have the power of purifying our senses. So the covering of the soul takes the form of the gross and subtle body, and that both the gross and subtle body can be engaged in Krishna's service. And the human life, because we have the higher intelligence, we can decide how we'll engage the senses, how we'll direct the mind, what we'll say, what we'll hear, and if we follow the instructions, then we become purified and eventually regain our spiritual body, even in this lifetime. The great devotees, they live on two planes. Prabhupada said he's sitting in 2nd Avenue. He says, I'm not really here. He said, I'm really still in Vrindavan, because he's remembering Krishna at every moment. So he's not, it's a difference. There's a difference in consciousness. So that's the basic principle. You can consult the 3rd canto. You've texted me, so I can text you back there with the reference later on, exactly which chapter. You can understand how it develops. Okay, so we have a few more minutes. Anyone else? Okay, so let's see. We can go on. And Krishna now, in the rest of the chapter, he'll show why it's so accessible. Because, okay, even if you can't practice the most strict thing, then you can do this, you can do this, So it's very wonderful. It means that this is how most accessible. He really wants us to step forward and practice. Whereas with the impersonalists and the Gyanis and those, then he keeps his distance, because they don't show any willingness to be attracted to him. Okay, text 8. Mayeva mana aratsva Mai buddhim niveshaya nivasishyasi mayeva ato urdvam nasangshaya. Just fix your mind upon me, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and engage all your intelligence in me. Thus you will live in me always without a doubt. Purport. One who is engaged in Lord Krishna's devotional service lives in a direct relationship with the Supreme Lord. So there is no doubt that his position is transcendental from the very beginning. A devotee does not live on the material plane. He lives in Krishna. The holy name of the Lord and the Lord are non-different. Therefore, when a devotee chants Hare Krishna, Krishna and his internal potency are dancing on the tongue of the devotee. When he offers Krishna food, Krishna directly accepts these eatables, and the devotee becomes Krishnized by eating the remnants. One who does not engage in such service cannot understand how this is so, although this is a process recommended in the Bhagavad Gita and in other Vedic literatures. So here again, back to the essence of, it's, again and again he brings us back to the ultimate instruction here. So how does that happen? It's probably would often give the example of the iron rod in the fire. There's iron, and then there's this fire. So they're two different things. When the iron associates with the fire, placed in the fire, it becomes hotter, and eventually it becomes like fire. It can act as fire, burn something like that. So similarly, the more we keep our consciousness filled with Krishna's thought, and our will, dovetailed with Krishna's desire, and our senses connected to Krishna in all the ways practical, then our senses, our mind, and intelligence, everything becomes Krishnized. It becomes purified. And the tangible result of that is our increasing attraction to everything related to Krishna, and our increasing detachment from things not related to Krishna. Now this can often be kind of jolting and traumatic in one's relationships, because your old friends, even your relatives or something, what's happened to you? You're becoming crazy, like that. But it's because you realize that association is everything. And sometimes that association means that you have to cut off some associations. Kapila Dev mentions that also in his definition of the sadhu, which is really a definition of a devotee. He says, He's Tatikshava Karunika Suridak Sarvadehinam Ajata Shattavakshada Sadhavakshada Bhushana Mayananyena Bhavena Bhaktim Kovadayed Vidham Matkate Tyakta Karmanas Tyakta Swajana Bandhava. That these great sadhus, and they're very tolerant, they're very merciful, and they're peaceful. And why? Because they practice one-pointed devotion unto me. Maya ananyena bhavena bhaktim kurvanti yedvidham, with great determination. And thus, they'll give up any activity that is not favorable for devotional service. Matkrate tyakta karmanas. For my sake, they'll give up some karma. And chakta swajana bandhava, even their friends and relatives, if that's not favorable. Because who you live with, who you associate with is 90% of everything. And if you have to decide, because time is so limited, we don't know how much time we have. So to be serious about bhakti means to, as far as possible, use your time and and associate with those who will in that atmosphere which will further your devotion. And sometimes it means giving up others' associations. It always means that. So that's part of what he's talking about here. And so he's saying, your mind, your intelligence, and you'll certainly come back to me, But then he starts. Oh, okay. It's time to wind it up. No, go ahead.
Bhaktin Lauren asks, with all the drama going on about the coronavirus, I found myself easily distracted. How to overcome this? I'm finding it hard to finish my rounds.
Yeah, it's hard because now the temple is closed up, so it's difficult. The best thing to do is to try to find at least one other person who you can share with. Take shelter of so many facilities on the internet. We have our classes, but one has to be determined. This is to pray sincerely that Krishna will give you the determination to chant and overcome the isolation. Isolation is like the most painful thing for devotees. It means you can't associate. You can't take shelter of the temple and get enlivened. So I really sympathize. So try to tune in. We have the morning and evening classes, and we'll you just pray that we get over this difficulty and we can again come together and associate. All glories to Srila Prabhupada.